The United States has the highest documented incarceration rate of any country in the world. We like to spend money locking people up here. We put more of our own citizens in prison than any other country in the world. USA, USA, USA. That said, only a small proportion of those locked up in the U.S. are locked up by the federal government in federal prison. Most of the Americans in prison are in prisons that are run by the states. So in the most incarcerated country on earth, what's the most incarcerated place in the country? It is not that easy to find out. It's not the kind of thing that states like to brag about. Even if you love the idea of locking a lot of people up, you probably still don't like the idea of paying to lock a lot of people up. So it is not a readily available figure. But at the website of the Sentencing Project, they've got this cool, nifty rollover map where you can get the incarceration rate for every state in the country just by moving your mouse around the country. And you can see, when you do it that way, that the use of prison in this country all essentially just drips down toward the southeast. And it pools in Louisiana. All of the highest incarceration rates in the country are in the southeast. But the closer you get to Louisiana, the higher your rate of locking up your citizens, more or less. The national average per 100,000 population is about 500 people in prison, 500 nationally. Louisiana is at 881. The only states that come anywhere near Louisiana in terms of how much of their population they lock up are the states that touch Louisiana, or that try to. Mississippi, Alabama, Texas, and Oklahoma. They are vaguely in competition with Louisiana, but they are left way behind. In the country that locks up more people than anywhere in the world by a mile, Louisiana locks up more people than anywhere else by a mile. During the Confederacy, during the course of the Civil War, Louisiana, as a Confederate state, had 3 different state capitals. They had to keep giving up their state capitals and founding new ones as Union troops kept invading them and taking them over in succession. The only Confederate Louisiana state capital that Union troops did not take over, as far as I understand it, was the city of Shreveport, tucked up into the far northwest corner of the state. Shreveport held on even after Robert E. Lee surrendered in April 1865. They held on as long as they could. In the Reconstruction era, just after the Civil War, Caddo Parish earned the nickname the Bloody Caddo for its high proportion of black citizens who were murdered. Congressional inquiries and historians documented the white posses and paramilitary organizations that maintained Caddo Parish as the last stand of the Confederacy in more ways than one. In 1902, Caddo Parish gifted a parcel of land to the Daughters of the Confederacy to put up this monument. It is a monument to Caddo Parish being supposedly the last place on land where the Confederate flag was lowered after the South lost the war. The monument has busts of 4 Confederate generals on each corner. Its top has an anonymous Confederate soldier holding a rifle. Cleo, the muse of history, is depicted below the words, "Lest we forget." That monument went up in front of the courthouse in 1902. In 1951, in case the meaning wasn't clear enough, with those 4 Confederate generals and all the rest, in 1951, they added to it. They added a flagpole and the Confederate flag. And there it stands, still outside the Caddo Parish Courthouse today in 2011. 2 years ago this week, a 30-year resident of Shreveport named Carl Staples was summoned to jury duty at that courthouse, the one with the Confederate monument and the Confederate flag out front. Mr. Staples called the parish clerk's office to say he did not want to attend jury duty because of that Confederate flag out front. The clerk told him a warrant for his arrest would be issued if he did not show up to serve. So Carl Staples went to the courthouse to fulfill his civic responsibility. He ended up in the case of an African-American man accused of killing a white man. During the jury selection process, Mr. Staples restated his objection to the Confederate flag flying just yards away. He told the courtroom that it was a symbol of one of the most heinous crimes ever committed to another member of the human race, and I just don't see how you could say that. I mean, you're here for justice, and then again, you overlook this great injustice by continuing to fly this flag. The prosecutor in the case moved to strike Carl Staples from the jury, saying that based on those comments, he could not be fair in the case. The judge granted the motion. There were 7 remaining qualified black prospective jurors. The prosecution successfully moved to strike 5 of them. But Carl Staples was taken off that jury specifically because of his stated objections to the Confederate flag flying outside the courthouse. The jury in the end consisted of 11 white people and one African-American woman. The man on trial in the case is named Felton Dorsey. He He was eventually convicted. He was sentenced to death. Now, Mr. Dorsey maintains that he is innocent of the crime for which he has been sentenced to die. He's challenging his conviction and his sentence. Today, Felton Dorsey's attorney from the ACLU Capital Punishment Project, his attorney, incidentally, is a white woman attorney who is from Caddo Parish. She argued at the Louisiana State Supreme Court in New Orleans today that Mr. Dorsey's conviction should be overturned. Carl Staples was struck off that jury explicitly because he objected to the Confederate flag flying outside that courtroom. And so, in the most highly incarcerated state of the most highly incarcerated country on earth, where 32% of Louisiana's population is black, but 70% of its prison population is black, do we accept that it is a prerequisite for serving on a jury that you do not object to doing so under the Confederate flag? The Louisiana Supreme Court started mulling that over today. I thought we stopped mulling over stuff like this 146 years ago this spring at Appomattox, but we will keep you posted on what they figure out in New Orleans.